We're doing a series of scientific studies with color to help you understand the differences between intensities and values, not only their differences, but how they relate to each other. We found out in our first set that when we're working with orange and blue, we might have to adjust the orange a bit if we're using ultramarine blue. We find out when we're working with purple and yellow, which are the two colors I'm working with in this set, that we have to adjust maybe just a little bit more because several things happen. Colors as they come out of the tube in the purples, and the deep, deep dark purples that we'll need to do this study, might lean a little bit more towards red, or they might lean a little bit more towards blue. And so we might have to adjust our darker color when we're working with yellow and purple. Whereas when we're working with orange and blue, if we're using ultramarine blue, all we'll need to do with ultramarine blue is just add white, as we saw in the previous studies. So if you haven't watched the previous studies on ultramarine blue, you might want to go ahead, ultramarine blue and orange, you might want to go ahead and watch those, or just pick up here and maybe go back. So to start with, there are several dark purples as they come out of the tube. The one I prefer is the Gamlin Dioxazine purple. And when we're working with purples, we know that there are several degrees of purples as they come out of the tubes in their darkest dark. The one I like is the Dioxazine purple. There's also the Carbazole purple, but there are other dark purples too. So in order to do a study like this, we need one that is the darkest dark. Now if we begin with the other part of purple and yellow is that yellow does such funky things. It's the lightest color on the color wheel. And so we have to make it darker. And it does such funky things when it goes darker. So we got two parts of adjustment here. We're going to follow the same procedure as we followed with our first set of studies. So the first thing we've got to do is to adjust the hues so that they will be exact complements. Now oftentimes when people are trying to get neutrals with complements, they can't get an exact neutral because they won't be working with exact complements. So the first thing we need to do is to be sure that we adjust the hues to get exact complements in order to do our study. So I'll start out with Carbazole Violet, and I'm using Hensi Yellow Light. Now there again, the yellow that you're using is going to determine what happens, so you might have to adjust a bit. I'm going to show you how to go about that process of adjusting. Now I've got I've got the Dioxazine purple already here on the palette, but first of all, I want to see, I'll pull a little bit of yellow down here. First of all, I want to see if Dioxazine purple is going to make, with Hensi Yellow Light, an exact neutral. And the way I do that, first of all, is I've got to adjust the value of the purple. So I'm doing this off my work area here in order to find that. So I'll pull a little bit of that down here and then add some white to it to adjust the value. That means it's got to be very, very light, in order to get an exact reading of what the color does when it's mixed with white. So that means get it very, very light, very, very light. It doesn't have to be the exact value of the yellow, but light enough so that the two are going to neutralize each other and stay pretty much in the same value range. So I'll do that. Now this is a test. This is step one, where we adjust the hues of each color. I want to see if I pull this. Let's be sure that's mixed well. Don't want that dark in there. Now I want to see. I'm going to pull the yellow in here. I want to see, can I get an exact neutral when I pull the yellow into there. Now you can tell by the value of my palette and the color of my palette what's happening. Right now it's leaning more towards yellow, so I'm going to pull more of the purple into it. And if by pulling more of the purple into it, it doesn't go into exact neutral, I'll know I've got some adjusting to do. You can see what's happening here. It either goes more towards yellow or it goes more towards violet, but it won't go to a gray. You can compare that with my gray palette here, and you can see it won't go towards gray. So that means that I've got to do another adjustment. The Dioxazine Purple is not an exact complement of Hansa Yellow Light. Now, if I know that what's happening here is that this is going, it seems to go more towards orange, as you can tell. So I need to add the complement of orange, which means I need to add a little bit more blue back into this purple in order to make it the exact complement of Hansa Yellow Light. Depending on the colors you use, it could be that you will need to adjust the yellow. And I could adjust the yellow, but adjusting the purple will make it much easier to do. So what I'll do here is I'll come over to the ultramarine blue and put a little ultramarine blue right here and value correct. If you just throw the ultramarine blue in this, it's going to change the value as well as the hue. You won't know what you're working with. So when you're working with colors and color mixing, always value correct before you mix the colors. Alright, so what I want with this ultramarine blue, I want it to be pretty much in the same value range as this violet or this purple is. So here we go. Violet, purple, it doesn't matter which one what you call it. Now, I'm going to gradually add into this mixture a little bit of this ultramarine blue and see does it cause that to go more towards gray. Alright, and seeing it's almost getting there. Almost, but not quite. So that means it needs a little bit more. So that means that carbazole violet, not carbazole, the Dioxazine Purple, is a little bit more of a, leaning a little bit more, there we go, right there, there. If I hold that up to here, if I get the grayscale and compare them here, I can see that now it's going towards neutral. So that means in order for this to work, I've got to add ultramarine blue back into it. So how much? Well, that's kind of a crapshoot. So what we'll do here is I'll pull ultramarine blue. I'm going to get, let's see, about that much. I'm going to add it in. This is a trial and error, but be sure it's thoroughly mixed. Thoroughly mixed, because if it's not thoroughly mixed, you'll get variations in the future mixtures. So I'll just get that thoroughly mixed, pulling that color in like that. Now, it's so dark I can't tell what I've got. So here I got the information. Now what I need to do is do another test. I'll pull that mixture over, add white to get the value. Now we can see that already feels more purple than this original mixture did. Now let's add the yellow into that and see. Is that going to do the job? Because it might not. It might not have added quite enough of the ultramarine blue into it. I need to do a little more value correction here. A little bit more. Okay, now that seems to be in the same value range. Let's pull it in. See, it's still not quite enough. So this is why it's important when you're doing scientific studies of color. This is why it's important to be sure that you have exact complements in order to be able to control this. And this will also inform you in your painting. If you're mixing colors, you can't quite get it to go the direction you're trying to get it to go. This kind of exercise, if you do the exercise, do the chart as you see I'm doing here, this is going to inform you more about what kind of decisions you can make when you're mixing color. So that tells me I didn't add enough ultramarine blue, that I need to add more. So I'm going to pull more ultramarine blue into this. Now part of the problem there is that ultramarine blue is a very weak tinting strength. Dioxazine Purple is a very strong tinting strength. So that means that although I'm adding a larger amount of ultramarine blue, it still is going to take a lot more in terms of quantity than I think it should take in order to change that purple to the degree I need it to be. So this can end up being tedious, but if you're willing to painstakingly work with it, it can often give you exactly what you want. And I need to add just a little bit more of that ultramarine blue. I'm just going to pull some straight out of the tube here. And then we'll test it again. So it often, the reason beginning painters will have trouble with color is that they're not informed about how one color will affect another. And one way that you can make yourself thoroughly informed is to do these scientific studies where you're watching what happens. You're not trying to predict ahead of time what happens, but you're actually watching what happens when you pull colors together and you control the color relationship, to control the colors that you're working with. Now let's try that. I'll pull a little bit of this right here. I value correct. Always value correct. Value correct. Now I can see that's getting closer. My eye's telling me. You can see now how much bluer this is than this. And I suspect we're very close to where we need to be in order to make those two colors totally neutralize each other. Let's put a little bit more of the yellow into that. Now let's see what happens. It's getting more neutral. Be sure they have a clean palette knife here. I believe that's it. Add a little bit more white into it so I can see it a little better. Now let's add a little bit more yellow. There it is. Right in there. Now the way I can tell, I'll hold my, let's put just a little more of that purple in there. It's leaning a little bit more towards yellow, but I can see that they are neutralizing each other now. That's an exciting thing. So I can hold this, go back to the neutral scale here, and hold my, there we go right there, hold my palette knife next to that. You can see I've got a gray now. So now I know I have this palm color corrected so that those two will neutralize each other. So now let's see, there's one other little adjustment we're going to have to make, and so we'll need to make that to the yellow. So this is the second part of adjusting the color when we're working with yellow and purple. Now I'm going to clean off my palette really, really good. I'm going to spray a little Gamsol right in here to be sure to get all those colors off. And now let's see about this thing about yellow. What is there about yellow? Well, what there is about yellow, as far as doing a controlled study like this, is that as yellow gets darker and darker and darker, it can do some funky things. What do we have to add to yellow to make it get darker and darker and darker? Sometimes if you're trying to get yellow darker, it's going to lean more towards orange. Sometimes it's going to lean more towards green, because that's the way it behaves. So one way that you can control a study like this is to start out with the darkest dark of the darkest yellow we know we have, which is raw umber. So we got some raw umber, and just going to go ahead and put some raw umber on the palette right here. If you don't have raw umber, the Rembrandt raw umber, it's not very expensive, but Rembrandt raw umber is very, very close to about the darkest yellow that you can get. If other brands of raw umber might be just a little bit lighter. So it doesn't matter. You could get another brand and add maybe a little bit of purple to it and cause it to go darker. So the relationships here are that in order for the color to go darker in shadow, we always have to add the complement. Well, when we're doing a study like this, we need to have those yellows already lined up for us. So this is raw umber, which is the darkest yellow. Now, what we'll need to do is to set up a scale of yellows that are going to gradate from the darkest dark to the lightest light. The lightest light of the yellow we're working with here is Hansa Yellow Light. Now, another color that will that is really a yellow going very, very dark is raw sienna. some raw sienna right there. Now that represents raw sienna right here represents a middle value of yellow. Now we can know that by going back to our value scale here, and if we squint on the value scale, we can see that raw sienna actually registers. Squint, you can see that the raw sienna blends with this middle value range on the value finder here. So that tells us that. And then we can go back to the Hansa yellow light for the lightest yellow. So this will be the range of yellows that we'll need to work with. Now, it's a good idea not to stop right there, but to try one more thing, because this is the lightest yellow going to the darkest yellow. We'll try one more thing to be sure that this is going to neutralize this. And so what we'll do here, one more little step. That's the reason that working with yellows and purples, it can be kind of tricky, because you have to adjust as you go along. So we'll do one more little step. I need to value correct this so that it's in a middle value. So value correct right in here, just like that, so that it's the same value as this. Now I want to bring a little bit of the raw sienna into this, side by side. Now, will they turn each other gray? Will they neutralize each other? When I do that, we see a similar thing happening as we saw happening with yellow. Let's see, let's take that. It doesn't want to go totally gray. Add just a little bit more of this into there so that you can see this doesn't want to go totally gray right here. So what that tells us is that raw sienna is a little bit on the orange side. So what do? If that's a little bit on the orange side, we need to scoot it back over. That means we need to add just a little bit of blue into it to further push it so that it's not quite so orange. Now I know this can get complicated, but the reason I'm going through this with you is to show you why sometimes when you're trying to mix two colors to get a neutral and they don't go to an exact neutral, it's because there's something screwy about one of the colors. So if we add, again, if we go into the ultramarine blue right over here and white right here, value correct to middle value, doesn't take much of this. A little bit more. Value correct to middle value. That's close. Add just a little bit of this into here. And we see now, you see it's beginning to go more neutral. So what that tells me is that in order for this color to work, I need to pull out some of that orange that's in it. And the way I'll do that is by taking ultramarine blue, already value corrected, and mix into it. I'll just mix it right in here. Pull that around. Loosen that color up just a little bit. Give me just a little bit more. I'm not quite sure I've got that neutralized enough. Well, so that's what happens when yellow moves into shadow. That's what happens to it. It's not going to stay yellow. It's going to move either towards orange or towards green, and we keep it kind of in between orange and green. That's going to give us a pretty true reading. So I'm going to make this a little bit more here and get that a little bit closer. Always value correct. Now, if you are one of these impatient people who doesn't like doing exercises like this, then this won't be very meaningful to you. But let me tell you, if you will allow yourself to go through this step by step and watch Watch what's going on. Watch what's happening to the color as you mix it. Then you'll find out that as you're painting, you'll be able to make color decisions that otherwise you might have had a question about or have to struggle with somewhat. Okay. Now, that should work. Let's see if it does. So what I'll need to do here is I'll just come right into this little area right here and see, does this work? It's getting pretty close. It still needs a little bit more. So don't just get impatient if you need to make adjustments like this. Now, there is one thing I like to point out, and that is that your raw sienna might already be adjusted enough. Raw sienna is another one of those colors that will vary in hue according to manufacturer. So it could be that your raw sienna will not need to have all this adjustment done to it. It might already be the hue that you need in order to make this work. Just a little bit more patience here, and let's try it. Put it right over here. That's getting closer. It's getting closer. Need a little bit more of that purple in there. Value correct. Always value correct. See if that's, you can hold this up to our value scale. We are close. We are close. It's still leaning a little bit more towards the orange, but it's close enough. All right, so that shows you how to value correct and get ready in order to do a study of seeing the relationships of making total neutrals with yellow and purple and getting the values of yellow and purple. Hope you enjoyed this quick tip. If you have questions or a suggestion for a quick tip, leave us a comment right down here in the YouTube comment box. And take a trip over to DianneMize.com and look at all the things we have there for you, including full-length video tutorials. And while you're there, sign up for our newsletter so you'll always be informed of our latest adventures. And thanks for watching.